They are languages and letters, they are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're better than they all. They are languages and letters, they are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're better than they all. There are canyons, they are yawning in the night. They are rank and bitter anger, they are all devoid of light. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul-foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul-foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. Let us build a bridge of music, let us cross this river song. Let us span another canyon, let us write another wrong. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. We will tell them building bridges and be off and on.
Good morning. This is Bridges Programming. Thank you, Bill Staines, for letting us use your song Bridges on Bridges Programming. We're here to get together with all the different thinking people, like the Republicans and Democrats and conservatives and liberals. We want to change the attitude about come together instead of arguing which one. How are we going to fix the problems? And we're here to help humanity and maybe the planet, because the planet will be here, we may not. This is Bridges Programming, sponsored by the Human Renewable Energy Measurement, the HREM.org. My name is Jeff Bella. Next to me is Zion
Kloss.
And Lucy
Holtzsnyder.
and Susan Comont.
And on the other side of the East Coast is
2,000 miles away is Dennis Carius. This is
Dennis.
Sunday. This is
Hi.
Hello, Dennis, and this is Sunday on the front stoop, the longest stoop in the world. And you can call us on World Call In on Wednesday, but this is the longest stoop in the world, I think. Sunday on the front stoop, and we're sitting here on a sort of our inside front stoop to do the programming.
Our front stoop couch.
And this is also sponsored by RenewTheEarth.org. It then talks about renewable energy and good projects that people can do, all about humanity. Also Bridges Programming, which you can do programs on if you choose to do it at no cost to you if you're a humanitarian type of a group. Okay, Susan is going to.
Well, I'm just going to eventually read my introduction, but in this case, this is like take two on a interview that we tried to do before, and we weren't used to. No, you didn't. We weren't used to having two people as guests before, and our couch is small. So now we figured out how to do it without knocking wires off and moving around and things like that. And so in this case, we have, just by luck and chance and wonderful fortune, Zion and Lucy turned up in South Florida, where we are, just because they're on a boat and traveling all the way from Michigan. Talk about the stoop being quite long. In this case, the stoop came to us in a way. They traveled down the east coast of United States in their catamaran. But I will read first a little introduction, and then we can turn this over to Zion and Lucy to tell us a little more about their experiences. What I wrote was, Lucy Holtzsnyder and Zion Kloss have been traveling and living on their catamaran Wildcat from spring till now. They started in the Great Lakes and traveled the Erie Canal to the Hudson River to Chesapeake Bay, down the Intracoastal Waterway through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and finally Florida.
And they use wind, but they also use a lot of fossil fuel.
Uh-oh. Now, here they are in Florida on the edge of the Okeechobee Lake, where we meet them, Jeff and I, and learn about their climate change project, which they call Climate Odyssey. You can look them up on their website, climateodyssey.org, and we'll be talking to them about their impressions on their trip, what conclusions they've come to, and possible solutions for our very clear and present climate changes. And what I want to start you out in your comfort zone so that you feel comfortable and talk a little bit about your Climate Odyssey project and what you're doing while you're traveling in order to communicate with a wider audience. And either of you can address that, or both of you in turn.
Yeah. Well, it's helpful to explain how we came up with this idea to
Okay.
do Climate Odyssey. And it started because Zion and I were together, and I was interested in art.
Can you move a little closer so people can see your face?
Sure.
Because that's what I do. I move, and then I can step, because I don't have a zoom lens.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, Zion and I were together, and I was interested in making art, but I was also interested in how art could be used to altruistic means. How could a work of art be useful to humanity instead of just being like this beautiful painting on a wall or something? And Zion was doing his PhD studying climate change research and hydrology, and he'll talk more about that in a second. But we were both interested in what the other was doing, and so we had this. The third element is that we had a sailboat available to us from Zion's family. He spent his youth, or 2 years, sailing on it as a kid, so he can talk more about that as well. But we had my interest in art and altruism, and Zion's interest in climate change communication, and then we had this sailboat.
What's this altruism stuff?
Well, the idea, my goal would be to use art to either inform people about an issue or make them have more empathy for something, ideally like environmental issues.
So when you say altruism, you mean you just want to do this because it's helping humanity?
Yep.
That's what altruism means.
Yeah.
Here you go, Zion. Here's your map of the United States. Now you can show your course
I
that
don't
you
know if you
guys.
can get close enough.
There
we go.
Oh, yeah, right. Can you-
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now show where you guys went, and you can show your trail.
Yeah.
You may draw it and then hold it back up.
Yeah.
Well,
So we started here with Wisconsin, and then I'm pretty good with maps, so I can probably do this backwards and in
Good for
reverse.
you.
And then we went through the Great Lakes.
That's the Great Lakes up here.
Yeah. We hit the Erie Canal,
Mhm,
went through the Erie Canal, then it hit the Hudson River,
mhm.
which got us out in New York City. And then we went down the whole East Coast and up
Chesapeake Bay.
Through
remember?
Chesapeake
Big,
Bay
big old
there.
Chesapeake Bay.
back down again, all the way to Florida.
Where-
And we crossed Florida,
right.
where we are right here, and to the other side, and went down, back up, and back again. And then this is where we are today.
And here's the Okeechobee Lake, and
Yeah.
there on the south end of that.
Yeah.
That's where we all
Okay, well, anyway, that's
are. See, that gives
now-
you some
now,
idea.
the interesting
Right.
part, when we went down that route, we've done that route many times. Did you notice there was a nuclear power plant in
Several
Newark-
nuclear power
in
plants.
Newark, Delaware?
Delaware Bay.
Delaware Bay.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that coming
Yeah,
through.
right.
Well, when we were coming through, we saw a guy in a fishing boat.
Oh, yeah, this is in.
And this is interesting because now people will tell you that, nuclear power is great because it doesn't create global warming. However,
It
it
creates
creates
other-
other problems. And I met this fisherman and I said, "How are you doing?" And we were sort of sailing slowly, maybe 2 miles an hour, maybe 3, and we just sort of take in the beautiful part of this world. And there's this guy out there, and he's got a motorboat, and he's sort of puttering around. And he's picking up fish, but he's picking up dead fish with a net.
Mhm.
And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, I'm fishing." I said, "You're picking up dead fish?" He said, "Yeah, I get paid by the power company to pick up all the dead fish near the nuclear power plant because the the nuclear water, the hot water or whatever.
It's killing the fish. And
It's
these were
killing the
big
fish.
fish.
These
I mean,
were
they
big
were,
fish.
they
Yeah.
were mature fish.
So that means that they didn't want the public to see
to see all the dead
to
fish
see all these
watching
damn
them.
Yeah.
dead fish around.
But- wow.
And by the way, I don't ever think that I don't believe in nuclear power. I believe nuclear power is the greatest thing ever, as long as you keep it as far away as the sun. The sun's our best nuclear reactor and the only nuclear reactor we should have. So that's where I come from with my nuclear stuff. But the rest of this stuff is really could be, I don't think we're quite there yet, and I don't think we need it. So that's my feeling.
Well, I remember also about the Delaware Bay or Delaware River or whatever you want to call it, that it was very rough in there too, and we were always against the
Winds and
waves
the currents.
right.
And it was,
But
this
it
one day
also,
was,
when you
this
went
one day was
very
very
calm, and he
calm.
was picking up the fish, right? And I also remember when going by that plant that there was
The smell.
a smell in the air, not fishy, but something
acrid-
vinegary,
an acrid
acrid,
smell,
yeah,
yeah.
something strange that was coming off.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
when someone says
Did you
nuclear
notice that
power is
too?
the way to go, but I just
What,
want
Yeah.
to,
let's hear their
Yeah,
impressions.
we passed that plant. We didn't see at that time. We didn't see any dead fish or anything,
Mhm.
but we did pass
because
a
the guy
nuclear.
does a good job picking
Yeah.
up fish out.
Yeah, we did pass a nuclear power plant in Hudson River.
Right, that would be
Indian
Indian
Point.
Point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and there they have the same issues of water heating
Mhm.
and heat pollution,
Mhm.
and they have their whole reactor system is built barely above sea level,
Right,
and they get some big storm surges with some more hurricanes up that way. They're going to be in a really bad place, and there's a
Right.
lot of pressure for them to change, but as of yet, nothing's been done.
Well, the thing is,
Mhm.
the worst what's the worst that can happen?
Nuclear meltdown like
yeah.
in Japan, like Fukushima.
So we just wipe out some more of the population. It's expendable population, right?
That's New York,
The-
yeah.
the
So
expendable population. So, well, we can get rid of all those people. We don't need those. I mean, let's face up to it. What's more important, the money or the people? I mean, let's weigh this out.
Reality.
Money, people. Let's go with the money. That's the way it goes.
That's the calculation right now,
All right.
yes,
So,
unfortunately.
so what do you think, Dennis? Should we go with the money or the people?
Well, no, I definitely say the people, but there's at least 1% of this country that says the money.
And they're making the laws, right? And slowing down the progress as far as closing plants like Indian Point, which is very ancient and needs to be closed down. But an evacuation of that area, if there is a catastrophe, is impossible.
All I
because
know is that
the,
when I talk to
the population
certain groups
is
of people,
humongous.
and I say that we have to close the nuclear power plants down, and they say.
Oh, is that what they say?
But if you talk to other people, they think we should go with renewable energy, all types, wind, sun, and biomass fuel. I get that kind of reaction. So all right, this is what we're into. All right, Dennis. So tell us how you plan on changing. Like you guys are young guys and women.
Well, that guys is
Okay,
a generic.
Generic thing.
Yes.
But how do you guys plan on changing this? I mean, I've been doing renewable energy since 1970. That's before you guys were born.
Mhm.
Oh, can Dennis ask a question?
Well, it's a
Oh,
long
you don't have to ask that
process.
question, Dennis. I told you. Just break
Yeah.
in.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm just going to ask the question because when we were growing up, Jeff and Susan and Dennis, we were told there's not just nuclear fission, which is what we've been using all these years. We've been using nuclear fission. I was wondering if Zion or Lucy ever heard about nuclear fusion, which I don't think we've ever used in this.
We do. We use it from the sun. The sun is nuclear fusion.
Oh, I know. Yes, the sun uses it, but
yeah,
it is possible for us to use it, isn't it?
Yeah, we use it all the time.
Why would you want to, though, Dennis?
See, I don't think nuclear fusion would be the problem of polluting.
It
our
may not,
world.
Dennis, but it would still be owned by
By
a
the-
very small percentage of the world population, and it's still an oppressive situation economically for the rest of us because they can meter that, as you say. You can meter nuclear fusion or nuclear fission or
What-
oil or anything. They'll sell it.
So
to
why
the
would
rest
you
of the
want to
world.
do that, Dennis? Why would you want to give your friends, the 1%ers, the ones you really enjoy, that they're part of your group, because you're the wealthy guy. Would you want to give them the opportunity to sell us more stuff?
No, I really honestly do not think that if we ever use fusion in this planet, that it would be good for the wealthy, because instead of fission, which is to go out there and get uranium, it's really hard. You have to be rich to go under the ground and get that uranium. But fusion means you take, we have like hydrogen dioxide, H2O. We take one H and another H, which is hydrogen, and when we fuse them together, fusion means now you have H2. So I'm just saying we can all get hydrogen.
But we don't have the equipment. Who's going to own the equipment that can do this kind of chemical experiment? It's very, very costly. It's like building a space capsule or something. You have to be practical, Dennis. I can't build one of those in my backyard. I mean, we've all seen Back to the Future, but that doesn't work,
Okay, then we can solve this problem by building solar panels. If you look at all those roofs out there,
then you're using nuclear fission
solar panels
with solar
on
panels.
Those roofs.
That's what
okay, I won't talk about fission or fusion, but if all those roofs out there, if we put solar panels on them, we don't have to have the fossil fuel like we're using right now.
That's right.
And my question is, in this country, just in America, how much money are we printing? Not just millions or billions, but haven't we gone into printing trillions of?
But it doesn't matter. You can't tell me what the dollar's worth. We're back to the reason why we're doing the HRM, because of there's no measurement for what $1 trillion are worth.
Okay, let's go back to Zion and Lucy, because we've got the opportunity to get their feelings about, and we may be.
I don't want to get off topic on that, so we'll get back to the topic.
Okay. Now the Climate Odyssey. If you want to comment on anything that we're just bantering about here, please do. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my part of the project is bringing in climate science expertise and earth science expertise, which is what I've been working on for a PhD and for my undergraduate degree. So I've been doing it for 10 years now. What I've done for a lot of my PhD work out at the University of Idaho is work with communities in rural Idaho and Montana to help them understand climate change, one, as a reality that's actually happening, and then two, that there's something that they can do about at their local community level and to adapt. And then the hope is once people are on board with understanding the reality of it, and then that there's something you can do to deal with it, that then you could either keep on dealing with it for all eternity, or you can address the problem head on, which is getting to the emissions part and the root cause of climate change. So through those steps, our hope is through the projects I've done out in Idaho and the projects we're doing here with Climate Odyssey, that we can eventually change people's perceptions. But you kind of have to go through those steps. And I really think you need to go through those steps in order, because what we really learned in Idaho, and I've been doing an interdisciplinary PhD working with psychologists and forest ecologists and social science experts that do a lot of work on communication theory and how to actually reach people and change people's opinions and change people's behaviors. And if you come across too intensely, then you are perceived as confrontational, or and people often shut down. Whereas if you come across more neutral and then reach them, gain their trust, and then you can build up to a larger effective change. And so
you're trying to bridge the gap between people. So Bridges programming is a good thing for you.
So how do you translate this then? You're going from helping people understand that it's real, that climate change is something that's happening for whatever reasons. Then you're helping them adapt, as you say.
Yeah, helping them understand how to adapt.
How to adapt.
And asking them how their community works, because they're the experts in their own community.
Right, and each community is different.
Well, how do you
show
them that how do you show them?
Well, first, how do you
first show them that global warming or global climate change?
Let's take one of these areas that you've been.
Okay, here we go. You come into let's say Moorhaven, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a group of people in Moorhaven, Florida. We have a perfect opportunity here. It's a cooperative small town. They own their own electric company. They buy from another cooperative, which is Seminole. This is Glades
Electric,
County. They
yeah.
buy it from Seminole Electric, which is also a cooperative. We don't have to deal with any paperwork with the big guys. The
Florida
town
Power
supplies
Line.
the electric. They are now everyone's burning fossil fuel to heat their swimming pools. They are still running around in cars that cost a fortune to run.
No trucks
in
for the
fuel.
most part, people.
They don't have they don't have local community stores. The poor people are just.
What would you do in a town like
What
this?
would you? How would
Right.
you? Okay, now you see there's an opportunity here that we could change. That you got to tell the town somehow, or that get through to this town to say, look, there's a problem with global warming. How you have an opportunity? How would you?
Yeah. So
go ahead.
the way that we did it, or the way that I've done it through my career and that we've done it together, is twofold. One way was formal like town workshops where we for months ahead of time, did advertising, created a venue, got a bunch of food and perks for people to come and encourage them to be there. And then kind of get people in town that are supportive to then spread word to other people and
Mingle with the people.
Okay,
that
and
are-
get people to come. And then
let him finish his
I
statement.
want to, because he came, he very simply said, we're going to spend some energy, money to get some kind of information out just for the small town venue. Then we have to supply food. Who does this? I mean, how do we, it's a great idea. How do we get funded? And again, we're back to the money. Somehow we have to get funded to get the advertising for the town that there's going to be a venue happening in 3 months. We're going to have a town meeting and we're going to have people in to talk about this. How do you even get to that point?
Right. There's a big
Do you
starting
do it out of your
point.
pocket or do you do it
yeah, it's been a combination of out of pocket because I just think it's an important thing to do.
altruistic?
And then
Yeah.
the other half is funding from different science agencies that are really see that there's a big gap between the science that's out there in the scientific community and the science that's being used by people day to day to make decisions. So there's a lot of money out there for doing this, and there's actually a lot more
If
money.
you're in a PhD program.
Yeah.
If you're what?
If you're associated with a university and you're a PhD.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a professional scientist,
Yeah.
there's a lot of money available, and actually more money available than people are really taking advantage of in a lot of ways to do this type of work, because the current professional science academia in general really encourages scientific research, and they reward that, and they don't reward as much of this work that they call it outreach, which is where you're reaching out from academia or from the scientific world to people that are doing the actual decisions in the real world. And so that's what I've been really involved in, is both doing scientific research and a lot of outreach for my PhD.
Okay,
That's excellent.
Okay, so that answers that question, which I will get back to.
So it's a
again.
combination
Okay, so
of your own impetus and altruism, and then grants, because you're in a position right now as a student
Yeah.
in a university. You can get these Science Foundation grants, to
Yeah.
do outreach,
Okay,
which
so
is
now-
great, and you're taking advantage.
So
of
now,
that.
so
That's
now
great.
we got the money together. We got the PR for the next 2
So
months.
how many
But now-
of
now-
these gatherings
now-
does it?
Now we get the gathering together. Okay, we bring in 20, 30 people, maybe.
Yeah.
And we go to the library, we have the meeting,
Yeah.
and they
Then
all
what
come
happens?
together, and now we have some people, maybe local town fathers, and you try to schmooze them and get them all. Now we got it. Now what?
Well, that process is very difficult because a lot of the people coming into these towns are very resistant to even climate change in general.
Right.
So we framed these workshops not as climate change workshops, but as forest management workshops. Because these are logging and forest communities.
Where you were.
Well, how would you do it here?
And so here I would say future of agriculture
Mhm.
and water resources issues.
How about
in
making-
the area.
Water
about saving
resources
money?
makes sense.
Because they say in the long run, once you get off fossil fuel, you would be saving money for the towns, and they'd.
Yeah, but in a conservative community, I wouldn't even talk about alternative fuels yet. If the community is still resistant to the idea of climate change as a reality, then the first step is just getting them to accept that, and that there's something they can do about it to address it on the adaptation side. Then once they're on board with adaptation, which a lot of communities are,
Mhm.
that are, I would say, less conservative in the country, Then the next step is, okay, now how do we start implementing change in terms of emissions and the type of energy that we're using? And so we've been focusing on communities that are more on the first step of accepting their reality and figuring out that there's something they can do about it.
Right.
We haven't been working, but a lot of other people work with communities that are at the next step of, okay, how do we change our actual emissions and fossil fuel use? And
once they're at that point, it's almost self-perpetuating.
Yeah.
The hardest step, it seems to me, is when you have communities that are resistant to even the idea that the climate is changing.
Yeah, and that's
that they're actually actively adapting to it already, but they won't make that connection in their minds that they're adapting to.
And those are the communities that we're focusing on.
Right.
And that's where I've focused on my whole career.
And
so one way to try and reach people like that is to have a piece of art. That's a different way of presenting information.
Bring in your specialty, Lucy.
Okay, so that's why I'm interested in this project, because I'm not a scientist. I can't speak as articulately as I can about these, intricate communication techniques or about the science itself. But what we're addressing here is that this bridge idea, right? It's very hard to connect with another person. So if you start with this big picture idea that global warming could end our species, people shut down. They're not interested. That's too much. So, but if you have a piece of art that I made and I said, look, I made this. What do you think? In a way, it's like a tiny bit of me that I'm sharing. I'm being vulnerable with
and
a person.
You're sharing part of nature too, what people can relate to.
Exactly. I'm trying to make something that's beautiful because that's what I'm good at and I like doing it. And so there's this starting point, this collage map that we're making. And from there, a person could be like, wow, cool collage. And then if they click on an image, that could bring them to some more information about the science or about adaptation, like we were talking about.
And something we really learned from all these workshops, and then the other thing I was going to mention is the other half, which is working with school groups.
Yeah.
But in either one, especially you see it a lot in school groups, because the workshops kind of attract the people that are already going to be engaged. But in school groups, only a half or maybe the third of the students engage with the science or the maps or the graphs. And the other ones, they find it very boring. Not because of the climate change, actually, just because the science in general, it just isn't interesting to them. But a lot of them really perk up then when you start dealing with.
What age are we talking about?
This is high school, middle school.
Oh, really? High school already.
So we do a lesson where Zion starts the first half of the class and he does a quick intro about climate change science. And then the second half, I do an art activity with the kids to actually apply the information they've learned.
Yeah.
So they get both in a single hour.
And so hopefully that way we can get a much larger segment of the population involved. And that's at a larger scale, that's what our project means to do, not just in schools, but with whole communities or not even at the community level, but just with individuals, wherever they come from. Some are going to be much more engaged with the art and some are going to be more engaged initially with the science.
I would suggest just going younger.
Well, it's tricky because
elementary school.
We would like to have a certain depth of the science.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. A 9-year-old and a 12-year-old can really. In fact, they have a gut feeling for science. I just would experiment with that, and I might, if you go younger, start with the art and then go to the
other
science.
thing is when you do one of these hour
that's
venues,
excellent that you're interacting.
If you record the hour, because at the venue you're getting to maybe, let's say, the 20 people or 30 people in the class in the room. I wouldn't call it
you have
classroom.
videos, don't you?
Yeah, we have videos. Yeah.
So you take that full hour presentation and you put that out on your website, which
It
is.
is.
Good.
Yeah, it is on the website.
So then now you're getting out to more and more people.
And that website is called climateodyssey.org.
In
case you want to look for it.
Yeah, and then the workshops are through my professional website, which is zioncloss.com.
Okay.
So,
and it's spelled, your last name is K-L-O-S.
Yes, it's
It's like Santa Claus.
Zion, Z-I-O-N.
Only spelled differently.
Yeah,
Yes.
Santa
And I'm Satan Claus.
Let's not go there.
But what these workshops they're not just now, they're a day long things that we did with all these communities, and we also interviewed people before and after and did surveys to actually show which parts of the workshop are more or less effective and why. And so we were able to really hone in on what parts of the work we're doing were more or less effective. And the takeaway message, and this happened over the last few years, is that we're doing a lot, but we are still missing people. We're not getting people very emotionally engaged, which is a big step in terms of actually enacting behavioral change, which is just like psychology theory.
Mm.
And so that's where we thought this pairing up, and it's kind of a
Yes.
trial run to see how it works. Pairing
Right.
up with art and science, you can really
Right.
engage both the cognitive with the science and the emotional with the art.
Well, the
Right,
thing is,
but not only that,
Go ahead.
you know, the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And it is true. A picture has more information, and what we see with our eyes has more information than words that we speak to each other. And actually, Buckminster Fuller said something about, he was very, very interested in engaging people with what he called artifacts. And these are things that he built, like what he called a Dymaxion car that could get 50 miles per gallon, things that people can actually see working and they can sit in and ride in. The geodesic dome that became a housing enclosure. People could experience that. Now, have you thought in terms of artifacts, or what would be called
physical things.
physical objects
Mhm.
that people can see moving? As you have the physical object of the two-dimensional artwork,
Well,
and then going on to the website, of course, and interacting with that. But when you do your meetings, is there anything you can also bring there that would make it clearer to them? I mean, you see where I'm going with that. You know,
Yeah.
something they can actually manipulate or ride in, or you know,
physical,
physical
something
thing.
physical.
Yeah.
like your boat is a
It's
wonderful
thing.
physical.
We show people a boat. Wow, people see our solar boat. We only had it out once this year. We first tested it, and we had 3 or 4 people run over to the boat. Oh, how do we do that?
What if you
Now here's the
conducted your?
here's the rub on all this stuff.
Well,
And this
let,
is where,
let them respond.
oh, well, I want to bring
I'm
this
gonna
out.
lose the train of thought.
Well, it's part of the train of thought. Is the goal is to bring people aware and to change the system. That's the goal. First, get them aware that there is such a thing as climate change. First, get them aware that, and then once they've agreed to that, then you let another group come in and give them some idea on how they can counteract the problem with maybe solar or different.
Well, it sounds like the second thing that Zion was saying is to help them adapt in terms of way you're
Yeah,
doing
there's a whole gradient of where you
you're
can
saying that the
Yeah.
changing the energy source is like the final.
Well,
it's like way down.
Right.
It depends on what kind of audience you're starting with, and so.
Well, how
we're-
far they
yeah,
are already.
yeah,
but
exactly.
We're talking about starting from the very beginning.
Yeah, starting from the very beginning, if you push too far too fast, you're going to lose
No.
more than if you had gone slower.
Now let me ask a question, and this is where I came from. I've been doing this for a long time, and I found out that no matter how much you want to bring people together, there's a major difficulty. When I can talk to them about climate change, and I'll say, well, maybe it's real, and maybe not real. Most scientists believe it's real, and they'll say, well, they're liberals, and then I'll say, well, and there's a few scientists, and conservative scientists, one out of Cornell University and one out of Berkeley, and they're adamant that there's no such a thing as climate change. But there are 2 that I know of out of thousands of scientists know that disagree with that. So everyone's entitled to their own stupid opinion. However, when you ask people, they say, okay, I'll buy it. There's climate change. Now what do you want me to do about it? Okay, and that's the attitude I'm portraying.
Mhm.
Well, you can use, biomass fuels. You can use, well, what's that going to cost me? Bottom line, what does it cost? Now that's when I said I'm doing something wrong. Why not say it's more profitable? The reason why we're not getting to this problem fixed, because the average person is not going to be a scientist, and the average person doesn't really give a damn. They're concerned about where their next meal's coming from. The average person in this town is living hand to mouth. They're concerned about where can I get my next beer from, or my next hit on pot, or how little do I have to go slave to make a living? What possible, this is reality. So I bypassed this trying to explain to them about climate change. I said, well, how would you like to work the same amount, less time for the same amount of quality of life you got now, or a little more for much better quality of life? Well, how do I do that? right? Bypass this whole climate change thing. And I said, well, we're spending, everything you do cost you money because of energy. You need a car to get to the store to get, and I said, now if you, and you pay afford, if you want to go to school to get a better job, well, then you got to pay back your loan. Suppose we simplify it. And we say that the economics, and I went right to the economics. If you go with renewable energy and we work together, you will have a better quality of life. And therefore, and by the way, when you change your energy source and have a better quality of life, you're probably going to help the environment. I reversed the whole thing. And that seems to work, in my opinion, very well, because I don't have to go ahead and bring them through that first step. I tell them they get a better quality of life because they're using a different fuel source. And the fuel source, once you then Dennis says, I'm not going to bring Dennis up, but we got all these, these trillions and millions of dollars. Well, if you set up a program, which is, I'm sure some scientists and some economists can set this up, that we just supply the paper to build the physical things for the changing of the physical change to stop polluting. Then we have a better quality of life. Then, and by the way, it's going to help the environment. So you revert, because I don't think the average person cares. And we spend a tremendous amount of time.
It's not that they don't care. I think they don't realize the impact.
But
because they've lived it all their lives.
You can spend a half a life. We've spent a half a lifetime trying to talk about climate change. Look how many years we've been talking about it since 1970s.
Yes.
And then we finally then they said, well, you got to put ethanol fuel in your tanks to mitigate the emissions. So we had to get rid of lead, which we're still using, by the way, because it's cheaper. So we need to get to the crux of the problem is the economics of it. Because if it was economically sound to go with a fuel that doesn't hurt you, then we would be there. Because people are still drinking water out of lead pipes. We're still putting lead in aviation aircraft, not and piston aircraft still has lead in it. They're now bragging that there's ethanol-free fuel for your boats. When you buy, don't use ethanol, which is ridiculous. And I'm not saying to use corn ethanol. I'm saying to use ethanol that's made from garbage or ferment anything. So I think that I'm not saying not to do, but we need to go. We have to move a little faster than 50 years. In another 50 years, the CO2 levels will be so damn high. That'll be a really serious problem. I don't have to say that. Most climate scientists say that, and a lot of them say it's even too late. Even it's over. But I'm optimistic enough to say that we could change this. But we can't change it unless we focus on the economic system. That's my opinion. So you see where I'm going with that.
Too.
Yeah.
Dennis has the same opinion. Yes, because Big Oil says we'll have solar when they can put a meter on the sun. And I know that was just a joke, but I just want to say that this was something that we call greed, G-R-E-E-D. If you can get oil from the ground in the Middle East, like at no charge by putting a dictator over there, and then bring it over here and sell it for $3 or $4 a gallon, then at least 1% of this country says that's the only way to do this. But what I was saying is there's so many roofs out there. You could put solar panels on those roofs, and once you put them up there, won't they pay? You'll get all your money back once you start collecting.
Yeah, Dennis. Once you do the physical thing, but I want to bring out a fact that greed is an emotion, and that's what we talk about when we see people, glomming on hoarding stuff. Greed is an emotion, and it's not measurable because we don't have a measurement yet. My point is that the way our economic system works, that's the way it's supposed to work, and it's working. Economically, it's working great. Unfortunately, it's not working to help humanity or help the planet or help the climate. So we need to address the economic system. And the word greed is nothing more than that. You can't measure that. It's like hate or love. You can't. How much do you love your cat or your wife or your dog or your husband? How much? Tell me how much. You know, it's an emotion. It has nothing to do, and that's where you're trying to come from with your artwork. Emotionally.
Well, that's my answer.
Go ahead.
Jeff,
No, let's not have the greed conversation right now.
Agree with you.
What's that, Dennis?
If 99.9% of us all agree with what you're saying, but the richest, the most powerful 1% or 1/10 of 1% disagree with you, who's going to win?
Well,
Right now we know who's winning because we know who's seems to have.
it's not a win or lose situation, Dennis. It's a question of getting the economics changed around so people benefit physically, and it's a physical change we have to change. It's a physical change.
Let's Zion and Lucy speak.
I mean, what we agree with all these higher order things, but what we really focus on day to day is how do we actually enact change in people. And I spent a lot of time in actual coursework in graduate school understanding psychological theory around behavioral change. And what I've come to realize is that the process of doing it, well, besides being very complex, is something that if your end goal is behavioral change of whatever kind, people need to both have a cognitive understanding of what's going on, which is where quantification and things like that come into play. And then the other thing they need to have is an emotional engagement, because even if they understand it, if they don't care at all about it, they're not going to do anything. And so this is where we're trying, and we're testing out kind of this art science thing, which is a newer movement that's being called such going around the country. Even though people have been doing this kind of thing for a long time, but it's becoming much more popular more recently. And I think when it comes to actually convincing someone to put a solar panel on, it's a combination of both cognitive understanding and emotion, because they are going to have to understand the initial upfront cost, which is a lot of resistance for a lot of people because they don't have the money to invest initially, even though they can see cognitively it's a long-term investment. Mm-hmm. But if you can have the emotional engagement and understand that what you're doing is helping maybe much more than just yourself,
right,
then you can say, well, I'll give up some other things that mean something to me
mm-hmm.
in exchange for investing more of my time and the things that I value into these renewable energies or
and
something.
We all have that potential of an altruistic
impulses. The reality is that you have to be able to afford the time to be altruistic.
Exactly.
Most people are working 12, 14 hours a day. Yeah. And even if they're educated, they have to work a job, and normally their spouse or their partner has to work a job to make sure it's paid. They can pay off their student loans.
So your audience for changing, for your audience for cognitive understanding and emotional connection, it needs to be people that have a little time to think about it, come to these meetings.
Or all different ways. I mean, or see some artwork, or see a documentary on Netflix, or hear something from their neighbor. Like, there's a million ways you can communicate, but the important part is that you understand, just because there's some quantitative or some very factual way of understanding the problem doesn't mean people are going to do anything unless they care about it too. So you have to somehow make both happen.
So by bringing an image of something that we can all relate to, like I know you're doing birds of Florida right now, Lucy, mm-hmm. and a lot of people, and of course some of these birds migrate all up and down the coast, so people can relate to them all on the East Coast and probably into the Midwest. And this is something, I've seen that bird. I have an experience around having seen that bird, mm-hmm. and I know what kind of environment it's in, and I enjoyed it or whatever. And then going from that and understanding that this environment could be impacted through the science, understanding that, and their environment could disappear, the fragility of it, and combining those things, if you can get those two things happening in someone's mind, then you may be able to lead them somehow to the next understanding that there's something they can do, then they can join with other people and do something even more
going around in circles.
Impressive. How is it going in circles?
Because you're trying to move a process about something
causes
that they
that-
can't deal with
Because there's too much
because
money
it
involved.
costs too much.
Right. I
You're
understand.
asking for time that they don't have.
They don't have, right?
You're asking for them to think about something that's pretty esoteric, where if we can get to the crux of the problem, if in
So
fact,
how would you start?
well, the thing is, I think that we have to go right to the problem. The reason why you have a problem with global warming is the economics work for damaging the system.
That's damaging nature.
It's damaging
and people.
nature and the system.
Right.
If that is in fact the problem, and we keep on going back to getting the funding to go ahead and get the PR, to get to get NPR or one of the programs to do a documentary, you're still chasing the money. Every single conference I go to, people are there. Where's the dough? Get me the dough. And then the people who show up, they're out there. If you have a conference where they're giving out keychains, you got everybody grabbing keychains, but they're not. The problem is the economic system, and if the economics were different,
The goal of the
economics
right.
is to benefit humanity, not to make money. That's the problem.
So how do you switch the goal?
And when you said that it's very complicated, I don't think it's complicated at all. I think it's just simply saying it's more economical to have renewable energy than it is not. And well, what is it going to cost me? It doesn't cost you anything. The government, as Dennis said, prints up trillions and trillions of dollars that has no value whatsoever.
Right. They can start programs immediately.
You just you make a dollar up
so,
with a certain number on it, which is today's technology is really easy.
In fact, there's an initiative in New York now for community solar, in the state.
But how do we pay for it? The problem is, how do we pay for it?
They print the money.
Well, they just print the money, and it's just for let's say your electric car.
Or your solar panels.
And then once that money's printed, you buy the electric car. It circulates to a certain point, but the minute it hits the bank, you can't buy stocks in it. It doesn't make money on money. It gets destroyed.
Specifically,
you want solar panels, boom. The money says solar panel money, and you go apply for it. You don't have to. It's not mandatory. You get your solar panel money. You pay the people to put the solar panels on. It gets moved in a certain order, but it never can be made money to make money with. So it's destroyed.
Is that essentially what a tax credit is?
Well, no, a tax credit still. The money's run throughout the existing economic system, which works through the stock market. And the stock market is the biggest inflation maker in the world.
Right.
What if you give someone a discount on a solar panel?
No discount. It's absolutely
it's solar
a piece
money.
of paper that says this physical, like
why is it not a discount?
Suppose that I say to you, you can go to school for zero money, and I'm going to give you school money, but not a loan. It's school money for you to go to school.
So that's a Pell Grant. That exists.
No, you're back to you have to get your mind away from what's happening now. That's a Pell Grant, and its money is raised with taxes.
Yeah, no, you're suggesting of doing an alternative way of creating value that you can
physical
transfer.
Change.
Yeah.
When I educate
Exactly.
you, you're educated.
Well, it's been done.
You're educated, and there was a big thing on that about Africa this morning about education in Africa. It should be free, and Dennis says, "Well, it's not free. It's free for elementary school." They were talking about the same thing in Africa. The point is, if I give you money, printed money, to use only for education, you got to pass your courses. The minute that money hits the bank, it's destroyed. So it can't be made money. You can't make money on money.
No, I agree. These systems can bypass the current issues
You
we have.
have to bypass it, otherwise you can't change it.
With all these changes, just like the changes we're trying to help communities make to be better prepared for the future under climate change, it needs to be a large scale change. And so how do you make large scale change happen? And then you get back into thinking about the actual practical steps of how do you change enough people's behavior through their understanding and through their emotional care. And so I think that's what we should be talking about is if we want to change the economic structure, how do we, one, get people to care enough, and two, what is information that we want to give them to understand?
Let me ask you a question. If I said to someone, are you going to work hard to change the economic structure, or are you going to work hard to make another $100,000 a year for the next 5 hours? What do you think they're going to say?
And now they would say make 100,000.
You bet your ass. So this is the point I'm trying to bring out.
We have lived in this kind of economics so long that people are focused on how can I make the most money with the least amount of effort.
The old
and so you have to go to where they are.
The old Youngman joke. I forget the old.
What do you want to?
It's the guy puts a gun in his back and says, "Your money or your life." The guy says, "Take my life. I'm saving my money for my old age." And that's where we are now. And no one, they're not concerned about what's going on.
It's not because it's not for any other reason than that this is what we're born into. And it's very hard to take yourself out of what has been, your pounded into you from the very beginning of your life.
Yeah, like for instance, Lucy mentioned, that's not changing anything. The Pell Grants are nothing more than another tax structure. When you talk about tax credits, that's nothing more than a part of the. They've manipulated the currency, the way the currency works, so it benefits only because they're making money on money.
Yeah, but
we need to make it on physical change to benefit society.
But
and nature.
But the only way you're going to convince enough people in our society or country, whatever scale you want to think about it, the world. The only way you're going to convince enough people is if they see the current system is bad enough.
They do see that now.
Some people do. I think a lot of people, especially conservative, by definition, means you want to maintain what you've had before.
Because it works.
Right. And they've seen it work before. What they didn't realize was what they were doing had all of these added costs that they were not accounted for, such as environmental damage and climate change and all those things. And so as much as it is the goal of changing the economic structure, you need to get people to care enough and to realize that the current system is broken. And that's where.
What do they have it to compare to? See, that's the thing. We are slowly getting badder and badder. But they are saying.
What we're suggesting.
Nobody can say, this is. Humans can adjust to incredibly bad situations as long as they're still able to go from day to day. It could get a lot worse.
Well, what he's saying is very simple. It's whether the system, whether you see it broken or not. The reality is that physically, we all have to have clean air, clean water, and shelter. There's no doubt about it. Anybody alive today is getting that food, shelter, and water.
But under what conditions?
Under what conditions and how hard are they working? So if we address the problem of how hard they're working, but you can still have a good quality of life. And by the way, when you change that to a better quality of life, you'll also help the environment.
Yeah, but you need, but in order for the system to change, people need to understand the current system isn't working. And that's what climate is all about, is trying to help people see short-term things for the long-term trends. And that is what we're showing, is that the environment at its global scale is being destroyed, and it'll work fine for the planet. Planet doesn't care, but it's changing drastically, and the rate of change is getting faster and faster.
I agree.
And so if you want to maintain what you had before, or if you want to make something new, either way, you're going to have to.
You can't maintain what you had before, and I'll tell you why. Because physically you can. If the climate changes and we have bad weather, or we have different weather,
adjust.
We adapt. Have to adjust to that.
Right.
However, we can adjust to it. If you're going to have floods, let's say in New York City, and it floods the subways, I think you're going to have a physical problem. If you have problems where water levels rise and parts of the world.
The whole of Washington, D.C. was just shut down by one snowstorm.
When you have a physical change, it's going to create a problem. So you need to change. It's physics, physics sounds very complicated, but it's physical. You can feel it. You get hungry, you got to eat. That's physics.
I know, but
people got to see it's that simple.
But the problem is people don't see the snowstorm. How many news articles related the snowstorm to El Nino patterns happening right now?
Which is a cop-out, which is a distraction.
And then how many times have they talked about El Nino and the level of El Nino, and then also mention that El Nino is just an index.
That's distraction science. That's distraction science. What you want is for people to realize that the climate change is occurring, and that it's something
that they care about.
need to care about.
But the reason
Right.
why it's occurring is because the economic system is insisting it change. It doesn't change. That what's holding it back is not the conservatives. It's not the liberals. It's not the Republicans or Democrats. It's the economic system itself. It's an entity that's stopping the humanity from going
to the next
a
step.
better point
Right.
for humanity and the world.
Yeah, and the reason it's stuck is because people don't understand well enough the consequences of the actions
Of what's happening.
And so that's why I feel if I want to change and make these changes that we all want to see happen, the best thing I can do is get people understanding how the consequences of what current issues are happening with the climate.
But can't you tell them you'll have not only a better quality of life by having renewable, you'll have you won't have to work as hard, you won't have to have a student loan, you got to physically change the way the system is. And most people
to change it, you need them to see that the current system is broken. So that's what we're doing.
Right. That's the point.
The current
But
system
I'm
is
showing you it's
indeed broken.
I'm trying to show them that we need a start point to measure by. Without a start point, you can't get there. You can say, look, supposing you have a cold, right? And you're not feeling well.
Yeah.
And we know it's broken. We don't feel good. The first thing you got to do is figure out why you got that cold and what you could do about it. So
the problem is the people don't feel the cold. They don't understand.
No, but they know the system's broken.
Maybe, but if they don't believe the reality of climate change because of the propaganda against it, then they're not going to see that the system is broken.
It's not just the climate change that's a problem.
I know there's a lot of problems that make the system broken.
It's all part of the economics.
Yeah, but
the climate change would fix itself if we change the economic system.
But no one's going to change economics if they think our climate's fine.
I don't think people care about the climate.
Well, now you're doing a chicken and an egg.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
so I think both are important.
So what I'm saying is we have to focus on getting people to say we want renewable energy because it's better economically for us. And by the way, it'll also fix the climate.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I want to swap it around because
Well, you're trying to go to what people are really thinking about in this.
They're concerned
in
about
this
money.
particular-
They're not
right,
concerned
exactly.
about. In most cases, if I go to 20 people in this town,
Like-
I bet you that maybe one of them might say to you, "I'm concerned about the climate." Most of them will say, "I'm concerned about making a living."
Yeah,
Right.
because they don't understand how the climate is influencing their living.
But
Right,
right.
exactly.
But so if we can swap it,
If you
and
put
say,
it in terms, though, of what's most important to them, in the language that's most important to them at this moment, and lead them from there, I think is what Jeff is trying to.
Yeah, and that's what we do in our
Express,
workshops. We don't
right.
really talk about climate. We talk about all the things locally that it matters to them.
See, now,
And so
I think we
That's
can.
good.
I got a
It's
great
really
idea,
And how
but
it
we're running out
relates
of
to
time to
But
tell
this
you
was an excellent, thank you so
Yeah.
much for conversing with us today.
Dennis, are you still there?
Dennis is having his breakfast, I think.
Dennis?
Dennis finished his breakfast.
Okay, babe. Well, we're going to be taking off. Thanks so much, you guys,
Thank
for
you,
listening.
Zion.
Thank you all for
and
listening.
Lucy.
We're going to be going out
And go
shortly.
to their website, climateodyssey.org, and they're going to be posting more and more stuff there, and a very interesting website.
And if you want to see anything about these workshops, you can link to both of our personal websites through that climateodyssey.org.
And maybe they can converse with you about how to set up a workshop locally.
Neighbors out of work because they closed the factory. You try to stretch your paycheck, but it's never quite
Thank you all
enough.
for listening.
Oh, energy,
Next Wednesday on
energy. It all comes down
Thank
to
you.
energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. Fossil fuel affects our lives like ripples on a lake. Cars and farms and factories and trucks. Supplies go down and prices soar, our futures are at stake. And when it's gone, it won't come back, and we'll be out of luck. Oh, energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. We can get our energy from corn and grass and trees. Even trash converts to biofuels. Break loose from the stranglehold of oil companies. Renewables can fuel the world. We're here to spread the news of energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone? Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.